The only thing I wanted to do, I swear to God, was like I wanted to sell enough books that I could continue writing books. That's all I really wanted to ever do.
That's the story of success, though. You all were pumped about today. We have Craig Johnson. You should know the name. You're probably going to know the name that he created, that he's associated with. But the Longmire series, it was from 2012 to 2017, I believe.
It was.
And then it became, I think we can go out and find it on Netflix now.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like it's one of those shows that's becoming ever more popular. Not to invoke somebody else's work before yours, but I didn't know what I consider one of the greatest movies of all time is Shawshank Redemption. It was not a hit in the theaters.
Right.
Which is wild. When I heard that again and somebody spoke about that a year ago, I went, what? They're like, yeah, it didn't do well. And it actually was the benefactor of DVDs.
Right.
And everybody started getting these DVDs.
Well, and the thing is like, sometimes, a piece of art has to find its audience, and I'm firmly of the belief a lot of the time, like those are the good ones, because if it's all things to all people, it really can't be very good. Look at when you get right down to it.
Did you think when this started, because you're at your you're on the book tour right now, like everybody will talk to you about the book, we'll hit on it so people go buy them, but I'm really interested in understanding like who Craig the person is, who the human is, this guy from Ucross, Wyoming, and this past and this journey. We talk about entrepreneurship, but listen, being an author and what you've done, it's entrepreneurial as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. And then I decided, okay, the odds against that are so great. Why don't I do something safe, like try and be a professional writer, So
that's dangerous as hell, I bet, right?
Well, and that was like, really, that was the whole, idea behind it. Because I thought to myself, because I remember when the first book came out, like that, I was kind of, amazed like that, because all my friends and family and everybody, they were you wrote a book. They were a little incredulous. In my money, they were a little bit too incredulous, like as a matter of fact. Kind of hurt my feelings a little bit like that. But I just, it's one of those things where you don't talk about it or anything, because why embarrass yourself like that? And so then when I finally wrote that first book, and found the voice that I needed to find, and also decided to do something that was like maybe a little bit different, which I think speaks more to the entrepreneurship part of it like that. A lot of times when everybody's running in one direction, you'd think about running in the other direction. And in crime fiction at that period in time here, about 20 years ago, everything was like noir. Everything was all like gritty, urban, alcoholic divorce detectives burying bodies in their backyards and all this. And I thought, well, what if you did like the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state? That'd be something different, right? Yeah. So I'm a genius, right?
Well, of course you are.
Yeah, but the problem
just decades later.
Well, the problem with that is how many people can you kill in that county before it really gets kind of ridiculous?
I don't know. Walt has killed a lot, right? What's going on here? You got 21 books of it.
I decided at that point in time that I was going to have to spread his jurisdiction out a little bit. And so, if you got somebody who's really good at these cases and that kind of thing, you got 23 other counties in Wyoming where, those sheriffs are going to look for somebody to jump in the foxhole with them and help them with these investigations. And I've had Walt up in Montana, like on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, the Crow Reservation, over in Sturgis, like that, and, over in South Dakota, like that, and all over like that. There was one book, the third book takes place in Philadelphia. The fourth book takes place, in Vietnam in 1968 when Walt starts out as a Marine investigator in Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base during the Tet Offensive, like it. And so I think you just have to make sure that you're not like grounded so much like that you feel trapped. You have to be able to find ways to, allow that to expound.
Just the 21st iteration.
Yeah.
Return to sender.
Yeah.
Do they just keep getting better? Is this like fine wine?
But you know what that sounds like? The question I always get every night, like when I'm doing these book events, is which is your favorite one? And I'm like, that's easy. Again, they say, which one is it? And I'm like, the one I'm working on right now.
Let's sell some books.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is like, in all honesty, not even being a smart aleck about it, like for gosh sakes, like, even, that's the one you're submerged in right now. That's the one you've done all the research, you're in that creative process with it and everything. And so it's obviously going to be the one that you're the most, attached to at that point in time. If it's not, you got a problem on your hands.
So was Walt an alter ego for you?
I don't know. Okay, my wife has the best quote about that. She says that Walt Longmire is who Craig would like to be in 10 years. He's just off to an incredibly slow start. And I can't argue with that really very much like that. But yeah, you always imbue, a character, especially, one that you want, to kind of carry a novel like that or a series like that, because the first book, The Cold Dish, was just a standalone book. It wasn't supposed to be a series. And so, you imbue them, with certain talents and abilities like that. But one of the key elements, I think, in these types, of characters, and maybe in any type of writing or art, is the old saying that you like people for their virtues, but you love them for their faults. It's the things that are wrong with people that, really draw you into them like that, for numerous reasons like it. And so Walt's had a lot of tragedy in his life like that, and a lot of things happened to him that I have not like that. And I wouldn't trade places with him, I have to admit.
Do you think that I've never been an actor other than when I was a kid, the high school plays and all that, but you had to really get into the character to do it well? Is being a writer the same way being an author?
Oh yeah, like there's a lesser known mystery writer you may have heard of, Tony Hillerman.
Yeah.
He actually had a really great quote for me one time. Like he said, "Well, Craig, you just got to sit in all the chairs. You have to be able to sit at the table like that and be all those characters and give them all a fair shake like that." And whenever you're doing murder mysteries, of course, you've got a new antagonist pretty much every book like that for your protagonist to go up against. And the thing I always think about with that is the Northern Cheyenne have a saying, which is, "You judge a man by the strength of his enemies." And so whenever I'm thinking about Walt in a book, I'm thinking, okay, is this really going to be a challenge for him? Because if it's not, then I'm not going to bother writing that book.
Yeah, I think the big fans that have gone through the 20 books, so they're expecting something hard, probably, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's nice, like, because I'm with the literary press, like, and so there's no formula involved. I mean, all the contracts for my book, all they say is just that it must be a mystery and have Walt Longmire in it, so I can get into a lot of trouble in a lot
When
of
did
different
that start?
directions.
When did they start giving you that freedom?
It was pretty much from the get-go,
Really?
like that. They really started out, I mean, it was Viking Penguin, like at, and they're a big press. They're like 100 years old. I think they're having their 100th anniversary this year, like that. But they were really great, like that. And I remember, Catherine Court, who was like the president of Penguin and one of the senior editors at Viking, when they were, in production, with The Cold Dish, like that. And I was there in New York, like in Times Square, and she walked me across the street to the Barnes & Noble, this big 5-story Barnes & Noble, and walked me back into the mystery section. And I mean, my gosh, it was huge. And she looks at me and she goes, and this is 20 years ago, there are 250 hardback mysteries published every month. And I remember looking around at them and going, how is anybody ever going to find me? And she looked at me and she goes, "That's not your job. That's our job. Your job is to write good books. That's all you have to do."
How many times do you think she took people across the street and did that?
I don't know. I'm hoping it once.
She made you feel that way, though,
She
right?
did. She absolutely did.
What do you think you can take from that experience, maybe to be an author in your book? I mean, that's really significant because, I was talking about this book study that we're doing right now, and it's really about the art of people is listening to people. But you make them feel like they're the only one.
Yeah.
And she did that for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I think that's a question of focus, a lot of it. Like that. I mean, we never, like, even, okay, like this is a case in point, like last night at a book signing, like never about, 200 people there, like that. And so, every time somebody comes up, like, to get their book signed or something, I make sure that I, make eye contact with them, shake their hand, like that, talk to them a little bit, sign their book for them, like that, and let them know that I appreciate the fact that in this, world that we live in, hustle and bustle, that they came and stopped for a minute just to come to this bookstore and meet me and talk with me about this book. And these books mean something to them, like it. And so if you can't give them a couple of minutes of your time, like it, with absolute focus, like it, well, then you really don't deserve their readership, it seems like to me. And I think that that's an important thing for people to learn, like that is that, you can just skim through your life, but that's what you're going to do is just skim through your life. You really have to live in those moments, like that. You have to be there, for those moments, like that, to make it all worthwhile.
Who made the Craig this guy of integrity?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, my parents were, they were big readers like that, and they had strong feelings about it. I mean, and they fell into a lot of those maxims of like, if I remember my father saying early on, he says, "There's two things you can't ever be afraid of: getting your ass kicked or a day's work." And I took that to heart like that. And I thought, okay, like, and so, and I think that's a lot of it. I mean, they, and I still believe in the things that they believed in the sense that, if you really believe in something and you want to work hard enough at it, you'll succeed at it like that. But you really have to go after it. You can't do it half-hearted.
When did this journey start for you? Like what happened? Because we're only 20 years into this.
Right.
It's like that guy that worked really hard before that. Where did that start?
A lot of it was like life experience, just like traveling around and like trying to, bring as much, to the table as I could, because the writers that I really like are the ones who actually did other things. They had other, livelihoods like that and other experiences to draw from. They didn't just graduate from some writing school like that and start writing books about writing students, writing books about writing students and all that. They had lives like it. And so I thought, okay, well, let's try and get as much experience as you can like it to bring to the table. And so I did like it. And then, of course, the other thing that happened was I delivered horses down out of Montana like that and found that little spot, Ucross, like at population 25, like at right the confluence of Clear and Piney Creeks at the base of the Bighorn Mountains. And I thought, boy, if I was to build a ranch, this would be where it is that I want to build it. And then I discovered something really, incredibly disheartening. Did you know you have to buy property, that they don't just give it away anymore?
I'm kind of in that business.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever given it away. I'm pretty sure you had to do something to obtain
Oklahoma, you had to run out there and stake it off real quick.
Like what I've seen, I've learned in life is anything that's given away, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah,
much.
probably not.
Right?
Probably not.
Yeah. So what makes Wyoming? Like I said, it's one of the states I haven't been to. And what's funny, over the past decade, it seems like the country's been rushing there.
Yeah.
And you're probably like, stay away.
Well, I don't know. I'm not one of those guys that, wants to just slam the door behind me and say, that's it, nobody else. Like, I mean, we have a couple of things like that, I think before we were getting started, we were discussing grizzly bears like that, and then there's the moose, and then there's, the rattlesnakes, and then there's everything else like that. But the biggest thing we've got is we have a winter. And so I kind of laugh about it like that because we have this festival that we have every year called Longmire Days like that, where we have, everybody that's fans of the books and the television show and the TV, the actors all come. I call it a FEMA disaster with actors is what I call it like that, because basically what happened was, I remember the first year that we did it, all the banks and ATM machines in Buffalo ran out of money. All of the restaurants and, grocery stores ran out of food. The one little cell tower that we had suddenly had 16,000 extra cell phones on it and melted to the ground like that. And so, it was an economic boom like that, for the area like that. But nonetheless, it was quite a challenge to try and do it like that. But a lot of those people will show up and they'll, come there, and it's fantastic because it's in July. It's really warm. It's beautiful. The mountains are all gorgeous with snow on them and everything like that. And everybody's like, I think I could move here. Then they get into your business and think about buying some property like that and all that. And I'm always telling them, you might want to come back in like January or February just to get a little bit of a taste of what the winter's like.
Tell us about it a little bit. Tell us about it. Is Buffalo close to Ucross?
Yeah, it's like about 20 miles away.
Why'd you choose there instead of Ucross? It actually had a little bit of something to
this. I mean, it's kind of Durant. It's the Walt, city. It's like, Walt's town is what it is. I mean, I don't even change the names of the streets or anything. So it's kind of like, Frank Capra-esque when you walk down those streets like that. It's almost like walking into one of the books or something. There's a Busy Bee Cafe right there at the Occidental Hotel like that. There's all these things like that are in the books like that. And so it just seemed to kind of fit like that. And anyway, they had a better infrastructure for putting up 16,000 people than our little 25-person town.
Do they have the statue of you yet?
No, there aren't any statues of me. They might someday. They might do a statue of Walt, but they won't do a statue of me.
Here's the humility. Maybe they could do a statue of Walt with you like polishing his boot or something.
Yeah, maybe like me standing to the side, with a pen.
What about these Wyoming winters?
They're a little rough. Like that. I mean, we just got through one like that here, where we had about a 2-week period where it dropped down to about 40 below, and just kind of hung.
40
there.
What?
Yeah, 40 below. Like that, and it stayed there for like about like about 2 weeks. Like that, and so it was kind of brutal. Like that.
What's old Sheriff Longmire? What's he do with a below 40-degree winter?
He does all the things he normally does, but with a lot more effort, I think, is what it boils down to.
So did you know this guy when you were young, and his name was just something else, a real human?
No, I think I just basically, it was kind of a Dr. Frankenstein kind of thing. I mean, one of my favorite quotes about writing is the one from Wallace Stegner, who wrote, he was the teacher of the Stanford Writers Project, like that. And one of the things he said in a little book that he wrote called Writing and Teaching Fiction, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. And what a crock that is, like that, because that's what you do. You take people and you put them in your books, like that. And but with Walt, it was a little bit different. Like that, he had a little bit of a Dr. Frankenstein kind of quality to him. Like that, I wanted bits and pieces, to make the guy that I wanted to make, like that, so that I could tell the stories that I wanted to tell.
So when all these young authors come to you and say, how do you do it? You get that question a few times.
I have.
Tell me what to do.
I have.
I have a better question, I think. What would you go back and tell Craig to do better or different?
Calm down. I think we were talking about that a little bit before the show. Like that, I think that there is something. I mean, it's always a balance like that, because that edginess and unease like that, and nervousness and all that, that electricity and energy that you have when you're young. You don't want to lose that like that, because that's a magnificent catalyst for making you, make some of those like headlong leaps into something that your more older and saner person would say, are you crazy? Don't even think about doing that, for goodness sake. Like, so, you got to be careful when you say, what would I trade and what would I change like that? Because some of the things you would change that you look back and say, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. Like that might've been the reason why it is that you ended up where you are.
What do you think the next after these 21? Because everybody's how many more are there? I'm not. You probably don't even know.
Well,
do you know?
Well, I mean, the thing is like all of the books are based off newspaper articles, like that, which is kind of nice, like that, because what it does is it kind of grounds Walt in a reality of what's really going on, in the contemporary Rocky Mountain West. I mean, I sometimes read books that take place in my part of the world, and I say to myself, there's no way that would ever possibly happen. It's ridiculous, like it. And so I don't ever want to, challenge that. I want to want to have things that like real sheriffs deal with, like it. And so that's kind of important to me too. And then the other thing is, if anybody has a problem with it, I can always say, well, here, meet Sheriff Goody Pickering from Bighorn County. He can tell you how that actually happened. And so I've gone around for 20 years, collecting newspaper articles like that. And Mark, I've got a file folder that's like 10 inches thick of newspaper articles that are going to foment, another Walt Long. I'm going to die before I get them all written. So what's going to happen?
Is it okay that these characters in these series of books, they die with the authors?
I think it is. Like, I mean, there are all of these estates now, that go out and find other authors, to ghostwrite and do these type of things. And, I don't know. I mean, I suppose, I guess if they say that's okay, but, before they pass, like I would imagine like that. But I can't imagine that most of these authors would really, go along with that. I think that, you kind of take them to the grave with you to a certain extent.
So this is like basically the Egyptians, like everybody's coming with me.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
But James Bond lives beyond Sean Connery.
I know. Look at it. And the other question I get all the time is like, well, is there any possibility that you'll ever have the same response like that Arthur Conan Doyle had with Sherlock Holmes, where he got so sick of him after a while, he threw him off the Rhinesbeck Falls like that? And I always look at him and go, well, first of all, Walt's not a sociopathic coke addict like that, so that gives me a little bit of an opportunity. I get to hang on to him for a little bit longer.
Do you what's your level of enjoyment, if we can rate this from a 0 to 10, of being the creator and still the author of this series?
Oh, full 10. I mean, that's the thing that's, I mean, it's funny because you were asking, what is it that younger authors, sometimes will ask, or students or something like that. And a lot of times they kind of miss the point. They'll come and they'll say, well, what's it like to have a beer with Lou Diamond Phillips? What's it like to go on these, European tours where your books have been translated into all these languages and everything? And I always look at them, I'm always thinking, you do know that that's only like 5% of what my life is, that the other 95% is locked in a room by myself typing about my imaginary friends. Look at, okay, so if that's not what you want to do, I mean, if you want to have the paparazzi chasing you around and you want to be a celebrity and all that kind of stuff, maybe being an author is not what it is that you want to do like that. I mean, if you really enjoy, that contemplative aspect of sitting down at the beginning of every day, and enjoying, being in that kind of introverted, kind of world like that, where you can escape into your imagination, like, and create all of that, well, then that's the world for you. But if it's not, then you shouldn't do it at all. One of my favorite quotes about that is Picasso. Like that, somebody asked him one time and said, are you ever intimidated, by that blank canvas? Like that, and he turned around and looked at him and said, that blank canvas ought to be afraid of me first thing in the morning.
What's going to happen to it?
Exactly.
I recently heard the news and different things I follow and stuff, but I think Ben Affleck recently said, hey, I hear so many people say they want to be wealthy and famous. He's like, take the wealth. Right? I think we wish things that we have no idea what it's going to be.
No, not at all.
Right?
Like, not at all. Like that. I mean, it might sound like it's fun there for a while like that, but then after a while, I would imagine that would get very, very, very tiring. I mean, I see it a little bit, with the actors that come in, for Longmire days like that. I mean, they put in a 40 and found like that by the time we get to the end of that long weekend, because people were just tugging at them at their sleeves like that, and trying to get a picture with them, and trying to get them to sign body parts, and all this kind of stuff like that on a full-time basis like that. And I just kind of step back, and every once in a while somebody will say, well, do you get a little upset by how much attention the actors get, and you don't get quite that much? And I'm like, no, I'm happy. If I had my way, I'd have them around me 24/7 so they could take care of all that themselves.
Take all of it.
I wouldn't have any of it.
It's what Ben Affleck said. You still get to have the benefits of being the guy that's done all this. But
yep.
I mean, I think if you talk about how much do people, what's the town now? So if it was overloaded at 16,000 cell phones, could it hold 100,000 now? Like, has the infrastructure built up? And developed?
No.
So they like that. They like to hey, we're just going to deal with this for a weekend.
Yeah. It's it's a 4,000 person town like that. It's got like basically one block is what it's got like that. And I still remember like that. The first time that we did anything like that, it was me sitting out in front of the Busy Bee Cafe, at a card table with an umbrella over top of me signing books for people. And amazingly enough, a couple hundred people showed up. And then the Office of Tourism for the state of Wyoming took me aside and said, hey, do you think, we could do this again next year and maybe get some of the actors to come? And I said, yeah, sure. How many, which ones do you want? They go, all of them. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see what they can do. And they did. They all showed up. And I remember going and picking up Robert Taylor, who plays Walt, in the TV show, and picking him up and driving him into town. And when you go into Buffalo, there's a flat spot here, and then there's a slight hill that drops down into that main street where the city hall is, in the county seat. And I remember, pulling up there and the sheriff of the county, who I know extraordinarily well, because I have to and his deputies all had blocked off the main street of Buffalo, and he turned around and gave me the horse eye and Robert had asked me, he said, how many people do you think are going to show up? And I said, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or 2, I don't know. And then we looked down there, and then suddenly there were like 16,000 people. So, and
the sheriff's like, thanks, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he really appreciated my efforts.
So you strike me as a Dodge Ram 3/4 ton guy.
Well, Ford,
Ford,
250,
but a 250, not 350.
No,
it's unnecessary if you're not pulling all the stuff and doing all that.
No. And that big, 7.0 diesel, it'll do the job with either 4 wheels or 2.
Mm-hmm. So, you guys don't have the speed limits out there, do you? Can't you get on some open road?
We do. We have the speed limits. The difficulty is that I'm kind of well known within the law enforcement community, and so now I don't get tickets. I get lectures. I'll be honest with you. And so I get pulled over by these guys, and they're like, "Craig, really?" And I'm like, "Can you just give me the ticket? I don't want the lecture, really." But no, they make me take the lecture.
What do you think there really is? What do you think the lecture's all about?
Oh, I think they're just, come on, what this is like. You write about it. Hey, come on. You're not supposed to be one of the law breakers, okay?
Yeah. Write me that ticket. See if you'll be in the next book. Let's go. What's your name? Can you see your professional life beyond this series?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's there are standalone books. I've got about 3 or 4 that I've already started. And, and you do get quicker, according to the book, of course, and how much research you have to do for it and things. But, you get a little bit more time each year, to actually step out, and maybe do something it's going to be a standalone. And so I've got about 3 or 4 other pieces that I've already started, and I just need the time to work on them.
Could we go through your book series here? And could we really get the experience of Wyoming, or do we got to come put our boots on the ground and actually do it? Because I'm sitting here wondering, hey, I grew up in Kentucky. It was a one stoplight town. It's not that anymore, but there were all the herds of cows and all, but it wasn't the Wyoming experience. I'm assuming I'll go out there and I'd feel like, what is going on here?
Well, that's kind of essential to the whole process. I just had a bunch of reviews came out about the book.
All 5-star, right?
Yeah, and then yeah, absolutely. But they just came out and it was nice because one of the things that they really complimented across the board was the descriptive passages. The descriptive what exactly Wyoming looked like and the feel of it, the smell of it, and all of that. And so that's kind of essential for me, because I think that when you love a place, the only thing that it asks of you is some honesty, and so, I mean, I'm not going to just give you a documentary of Wyoming that makes it look, like a travelogue, on, cable TV or something like that. I'm going to tell you the bad parts.
Because it's not.
No, I mean, it's got some bad parts it. And so it's essential to me that I get all those details in there and make it as honest as I can be. Because the most horrible thing that would happen would be if you flew in and stepped off the plane and looked around and said, this is nothing at all like what's in Craig Johnson's book.
Take me home.
That'd be horrible.
Yeah. So, all right. So we can experience it. We can really feel it. What makes you excited other than being an author?
Oh, well, I mean, are you talking about like other than the writing itself? Is
No,
that
just
what
other
you're
in
saying?
life, other than any of this part.
Well,
Because you're wearing the cowboy hat. It's like, is he really a cowboy?
oh yeah, I did that. Like that, for goodness sake. Like that, I hardly know any cowboys didn't walk away from cows and weren't pretty happy about it by the time that happened. Especially when you get to a certain age,
That's a tough life, it
you've been
seems.
stepped on like that and shit on and everything else. Like that, after a while, you're like, okay, there's got to be something better to do.
Did you
than
live that
this.
life a little bit?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. That's like I was saying, like I was delivering horses, and it's how I found U-Cross, was to come down out of delivering horses out of Dillon, Montana, like that, and I got down there and I was supposed to meet some guy from Oklahoma City, like that, and you trade the horses off with him, which kind of gives you an indication what U-Cross is like. We don't have a payphone, but we have a public corral. And so, I get down there like that, and he wasn't there, like that. And so there was a little bar across the street at that point in time called the U-Turn Inn. And so
You guys are so creative. You're so novel. The things you come up with. The U-turn in and U-Cross. You guys come visit us.
I know. So I went over there like that, and I gave him a quarter like that, and made a quick long distance phone call up to the rancher I was working for. And I said, he's not here. And I said, what do you want me to do? Like that. And he says, oh, he'll come along before too long. He hadn't left yet. And I was like, he hadn't left from Oklahoma City. And he's like, well, yeah. Like that. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Like that. And he said, well, just unload the horses in the public corral and just bucket up from Clear Creek, and go get some idiot cubes, which are those 75, 80-pound, bales. Like I said, go get some idiot cubes. It's baling season, and the horses will be fine. I said, well, that's all fine and well for the horses, but what about me? And he said, well, Craig, like I said, it's baling season. I'm sure up and down that valley, they're looking for somebody to throw bales like that. And so I threw bales for like 3 days like that. I never bought a meal, never bought a beer, like that, slept on top of the horse trailer like that, and fell in love with that place and never left.
Sounds great. Really rustic, but it sounds great. Does it feel like when you're home, is the pace of life we perceive, we're not from there, it feels like it's a more balanced and an average pace of life. Are we wrong about that?
No, you're right. I mean, so much of like, what the modern world is like to rush ahead, to speed ahead like that, and all the technology and all of that, with the phones, with the computers, with all of this stuff, like everything's faster. And, the Northern Cheyenne have a belief like that's not really what it is that you're supposed to be doing with your life. You're supposed to be slowing down. You're supposed to be seeing everything, feeling everything, living in those moments like that. The past is a ghost like that, and the future, is uncertain like that. And so you don't really have anything than just this moment right here, right now. And so it goes back a little bit to that, like, when someone comes up to you to sign their book, like that, if you're not living in that moment, if you're not living in the now, you're being robbed of your life in many ways like that. And so I think that kind of a rural kind of environment, where you're not really battling traffic, you're not really in a rush, everything going all at once. It allows you to slow down and be maybe a little bit more examining of the world around you.
Grizzly sneaks up on you, and you can be going slow.
Then you just got to make sure you got a slow friend with you,
Oh, faster than them. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you like these types of conversations, be sure to follow The Necessary Entrepreneur on your favorite platform so you never miss out on future content. I'm thinking about this signing. I mean, you really spoke to it to try to be intentional with every person. We always kind of wonder that the people that aren't, the people aren't waiting in lines for us and wanting us to sign a book and stuff, but what makes any of those people memorable and stand out to you?
Oh, I think just the return volley. I think that, like, you're always going to have some people a little starstruck. You're going to have some people like they want to get a picture taken with you, and you put your arm around their shoulder and they start shaking. And I'm like, look, relax. I'm not a movie star here. I'm just a writer, for goodness sake. But I think that, like, somebody that comes up to you and tells you, obviously the instances are like, last night I had a guy, he was, he said, older gentleman like it. And he said, I haven't read fiction in 30 years like it. And he said, and I, my daughter bought me one of your books and I read it. And he said, I've read every single one of your books now like it. And he says, I'm going back and I'm rereading them again, like at finding stuff that I didn't see the first time. I mean, how do you not, be tickled with that? COVID was huge like that, in the sense that there were so many people that discovered the TV show, because they were, in. And then they discovered the books, following that. Like, and to have people come up to you and say, boy, this really kind of saved me. It really, found me a place to go when there really wasn't any place to go. Like, and how can you not respond to that?
Yeah, those are probably good moments. Did you think, you probably get this question a lot, but I really want to dig into it on the entrepreneurial side of things. Did you think when you were writing it, like, maybe this will be a big hit?
No.
And if you didn't, was there any hope? Was there any thought? Because a lot of people have a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think what I was just trying to do is just write the very best book that I could, like that. And then also, in many ways, I tried to write a book that I wanted to read. I wanted something like that. The books, like, it's funny like that because I keep getting asked the question, like, well, what's the genre, that you work in? Is it Western? And I'm like, yes. Is it mystery? Yeah. Is it comedy? Yes. Like
Mhm.
that. Is it history? Yes. Like that. All of these things like that. But, you know, I like books that are kind of cross genre, because genre is a word I think that basically it's what publishers use to sell a book. Like
Mhm.
they can pigeonhole it and put it into a specific, type of book, and then it makes it easier to sell. But
That's what I like least about life. I hate being pigeonholed.
yeah, yeah, and to be honest, I mean, there's only two genres. There's good writing and bad writing, like it. And so you try and not be the bad writing and try and be the good writing, like it. And so, but you go around and you try and pick up all these different things and put them in the book as much as you possibly can because you want as many layers in there as you can possibly make. Because you want to create, a life. You want to create a world, that people can invest in and enjoy, like it when they're in part of it.
Hmm. Yeah, because you wrote the first book. It wasn't a series.
No.
It was just a book.
Yep.
Why do you think it was a hit?
I think, well, it was different. It was different than a lot of the stuff that was out there, I think, for one. And then obviously Walt, because the books are written in first person. And so you're pretty much in Walt's head, for 350 some pages. And so that better be a nice place to be. It better be a funny place to be. I always laugh about that because, students will ask, they'll say, well, how do you create characters, that, readers want to spend time with? And I'm like, make them funny. Make them funny. Like, who do you like hanging out with? You like hanging out with people that, make you laugh, for goodness sake. Inevitably, the next thing out of their mouth is, yeah, but what if I'm not funny? And then you have to look at them and go, well, you got a real problem on your hands.
Yeah,
like
right.
it sounds like to me.
Were you the guy making jokes growing up?
No, I was the one quietly in the back of my head making the jokes growing up.
The
Like
dry
and
humor guy.
Yeah, and and then it came time. I thought, okay, well, if I can't tell these things, then maybe I can write them. So
What makes a great cowboy hat?
Oh, it's different for everybody. That's the big thing. It's not all the same hat for everybody. Like you gotta,
I didn't know we were supposed to have a Craig one or a Tim McGraw one or what. I mean, I didn't know.
You gotta look at the shape of your face, look at the size of your head, all those type of things, and heck, even like the age you are or anything like that. Like I mean, I'm wearing a palm leaf now. It's an Atwood, like that, and it's very low key, like that, but it suits me, like it. I like it, like it, and then the big thing is, of course, like that. I discovered, I was doing the Texas Sheriff's Association, which was a little bit of an eye opener, like that, because I promised to come down there and talk with them like that. And Wyoming's got 23 counties in it. Like, and so I figured, okay, well, Texas, maybe twice the size of Wyoming. It should have like 50. I'll be talking about 50 guys. They had 255 counties in Texas, for God's sake. They're small counties. Like, so I get down there, like, and there was this one old guy, like, and I was wearing my wool hat, wearing one of my wool hats, like it, and he looked at me and goes, "Oh, must have got cool up there in Wyoming." Like that. And I said, "How come?" Like that. And he goes, "Well, that's when you change your hat, son. It's first frost." And I was like, "Ooh, that's a good title."
That is it. First frost. Is that it?
That is.
Was that one of the books? I don't know.
It was. It was the last book for last year.
Really?
Yeah.
First frost.
Yep.
Watch out what you're going to say to Craig. He's going to steal your great statements. What do you, when you go back, when did you really think like this, maybe this can be as an author, as this, like, were you going to keep writing regardless? Would it have come to an end if they were just for you and the people around you? Would you have just kept writing?
I like to think that I would have, like, I like to think that I would have, like that. And, and I guess, at that point in time, like that, I mean, the big thing for me is like an absolute disbelief that this was happening. Like, and so, I mean, I don't think it really kind of, worked for me until I like walked into the bookstores and like suddenly there were these like stacks of your books. I kept thinking I'm going to wake up any minute and this just won't be real, like that, but then when you walk in there and see those books stacked up there and ready to go and people lined up like that to get them signed and everything, then it becomes very, very real.
How long did it take before you thought I'm going to write a book until that happened though?
Well, that's a long story. Are you sure you're ready for that?
Let's go.
Okay. Like I sit down like it and I built the ranch myself. Like I did it all myself because it's out in the middle of nowhere and nobody wanted to come out there to do construction work like it. And so I pretty much built the whole place myself. And I got a little cabin built about 24 by 32 log like that, and got the windows and doors and the heat in like it because my wife demanded heat. Like women are funny that way. And so I got the heat all up and going like that. And that's when I decided, all right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write gonna get started on this book I've always wanted to write, like, because I had an idea. And so I sat down, I wrote the first 2 chapters of The Cold Dish, and they were horrible. They were really, really bad. Trust me on this. I know I wrote them. They were bad. And so I thought, well, the big thing is I need to go in and find out, you don't, what the problem is like, you don't know enough about sheriffing. You need to go out and find a sheriff and talk to him and see how he does what he does. So I drove, the 20 miles into Buffalo, like that, and I get in there. And of course, this is before 9/11. So there's no, bulletproof glass or, computer rooms or anything like this. And so I go in and there's a wooden counter. And then down the hallway, there's a door propped open, and the guy's got his cowboy boots up on his desk, like that. And I knock on the counter, and he goes, "What?" And I said, "Hey, Sheriff, could I talk to you for a minute?" Like that. And he comes out, and it's this fella, Larry Kirkpatrick, like that. And he'd been the sheriff there in Johnson County for like, I don't know, a quarter of a century. He had pigeon shit on his shoulders from being a statue there for so long, like that, for God's sake.
He's a comedian, you all.
So he comes in like that. He's talking to me like that, and he said, "How can I help you?" Like that. And I said, I shook hands with him. I said, "My name's Craig Johnson. I got a little ranch out near Ucross, and I'm writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff, like that. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to, kind of help me out with this, like that, And he said, "Well, I've never done anything like that before." And I was like, "Well, I'm not looking for literary criticism here. I'm looking for like how it is that a rural sheriff, would process a homicide investigation with, limited sources, like at limited resources, limited, staff and all this." And so, we talked for a while, like at, and I guess at the end he said, "Well, yeah, I can at least take a look at it and see what I can come up with." Like that. And so I walked out of there, and I was so sure that I'd solved my problem that I went home and added on to my house. And then I added
the books
on
are
to
going to be
house
sold.
again, and then I built a shop, and I built a barn and corrals and loading chutes and got the ranch all up and going. My wife had a store she wanted to open like that, and so I went into town and tore out an old opera house like that and redid it for her so she could get her store all up and going. I was back at the ranch there, and I was looking around for something back in the office like that, and I yanked open the third drawer down on the right-hand side, and those 2 little lonely chapters of The Cold Dish were looking up at me, and 10 years had gone by. And I pull those 2 chapters out, and I set them on the desk there, and I start reading them, and they were just as bad as I remembered them being 10 years previous. And I thought, wow, your life's all in order. Now's the time when you can sit down and write this book like it. And this is horrible what you've got started. You're going to have to go back in there, and you're going to have to reintroduce yourself to this sheriff all over again, because Larry was still the sheriff. And so I thought, this is going to be embarrassing. Like it, I didn't have enough nerve to do it. So I didn't. And there was one instance like that, I think maybe like, a couple of weeks later, like that, where I was in town and I was putting gas in the ranch truck. Like I'm standing there at the pump island, and all of a sudden this sheriff's cruiser pulls up. And Larry gets out. Now, I hadn't spoken a word to him in 10 years. I'd voted for him, but I hadn't spoken a word to him. And he gets out, starts fueling his vehicle, and he turns around and he looks at me like that, and he pops his hat back, drops his Ray-Bans down on his nose, and he's looking at me. He's giving me this look that says, "What did I arrest you for, and when was it?" And I look at him, and I thought, oh, boy, this is going to be even more embarrassing because it's going to be in public. So I stuck my hand out, and I said, "Sheriff Kirkpatrick, you're probably not going to remember me." And he goes, "Your name is Craig Johnson. You're the one that's got the little ranch out near Ucross, and you're the one writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff." And I looked at him. This is from a 10-minute conversation from 10 years previous. I looked at him, I said, "That is absolutely amazing." And he nods his head and he goes, yeah, if you don't mind me saying so, this book is going kind of slow.
You know what they say, to be a great politician, what you have to do is you got to remember people's names.
No, doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
So that got you kicking.
Yeah, it really did, like that. And then that lit a fire under me. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to die thinking, that wishing that I had done this. We've all heard the old adage of like, it's not the things that people do that they regret at the end of their life. It's the things they didn't do. Yeah.
I've been saying that around here for 2 years to people.
I
said, there's only two or three things in my life that I look back on. And the only things I have regret on, not the tough things, not the bad decisions you make. It's the things that I know that I wanted to do that I didn't. Yeah. And it was always about the perceived judgment of someone else. That's what it feels like. Because why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be robbed of like the opportunities in your life just because other people's opinions. Look at, come on now.
I think maybe at 46, maybe I've learned it now.
There
maybe
you
I've
go.
won the war.
There you go.
So when was this? When that happened? When the sheriff and pumping the gas? What year?
That was and then what happened was I sat down, I wrote the rest of The Cold Dish in about 6 months. And then what I did was I had a couple connections like that to a couple of agencies there in New York, like that, and I called, like that, made a few, query letters, like that, and told them, look, I'm going to be in New York, for this week, like that, I want to stop by and drop this manuscript off and have you guys take a look at it, see what you think about it. And, the majority of them,
the same story, right?
Never heard anything from them. Like
door closed.
Yeah.
Who are
Oh,
you?
yeah.
We see these things all day long.
But then there was one like that I went into like that, and she sat down. She said she had 10 minutes for me like that, and I said, well, that's 10 minutes more than anybody else has given me. And I sat down, and I talked with her, and I discovered later she was like one of the most powerful agents in New York. She was huge. Like that, she was the president of the Agents Union in New York, for goodness sake. And they said they had 10 minutes for me, and we talked through the 10 minutes. She said, tell me about your book, tell me about yourself, like that. And well, I know we're going longer than 10 minutes, like that, we're going into like a half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. And so we finish up like that, and I said, well, thanks so much, and I appreciate your time. And I, went downstairs where my wife, Judy, had like been sitting in a coffee shop because she was like so beat up from all the rejections that we'd gotten the rest of the week. Like she was down there and had about 5 espressos. Like and so, I get back down there and she's like, you were up there for a long time. Seemed like you were there for a long time. Might have gone well, right? Because you were there for a long time. Like and so I said, I don't know. I can't read this stuff. I don't have any idea. Maybe it worked. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. Like I said, we'll just go home and see what happens. And we flew home like that, and the answering machine at the ranch there was blinking when I got home, and it was Gail Hockman of Brand Hockman Associates, and she said, don't give this to anybody else. I want it.
When did you leave that message versus when you had met her in the office?
How long was the time?
Was it a day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like a day. Yeah.
Do you think she knew in that half hour she'd made up her mind?
No, because, you can talk a good game, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can write it, and so I think she sat down and started reading the book like that and felt like, this is something different, this might just work.
Did you believe her?
Not until I saw them stacked up in the bookstores. Okay, so I kept thinking I'm going to wake up and it's all going to be gone.
I always wait to invoke the spouse until the guest does. That you have somebody that's gone on this ride with you from the beginning.
Yep.
It's theirs too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, and then, Judy's a big part of all of this, like that, simply because, she grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and her parents were editors of the Hartford Courant. And so, she came from an editorial background, like that, and then she went to Wellesley, like that, in Boston.
She's one of those sophisticated ladies.
Wow,
then, Craig, what'd you do? How'd you
and then, and then she was down in Philadelphia, and that's where I met her when we were doing I was doing graduate studies, like that. And people always ask that question. It's always like, okay, well, my gosh, New York Times bestseller, like a TV show, translated into a couple dozen languages and all this. What's the greatest, accomplishment of your life? I'm like, getting that New England girl on my shoulder and carrying her off to Ucross, Wyoming, and getting her to stay. That was probably the biggest goal of my life, for goodness sake.
Did she have any doubt?
No, I don't think so. She was really, into the idea of like, out and away like that. And, but yeah, she's my first reader like that. I when I finish, up a chapter like that, I sit it down there on the kitchen table like that, and read it to her while she's cooking dinner like that. And we talk about it like that. And she goes through like that and edits the whole book. But before I send it off, like at the Viking Penguin, like that. As a matter of fact, there was one instance where we forgot to, accept all changes, like that. And so I sent it back to Brian Tart, like at the president of Viking, and it had all the corrections that Judy had put on there as we read through it, like that. And he called me up on the phone and said, "Would Judy like a job?" Like,
yeah, she's
like,
good. We'll have her do this on all of them. So you had you got your master's, you got your graduate degree, huh?
Mm-hmm.
From where?
Temple University in Philadelphia.
Oh, Temple. How'd that happen? You grew up in Wyoming. How'd you go to Temple?
I was looking for writing programs like it, and they had a really good writing program like it. And I thought, okay, this is, what it is you want to do like it. You better get serious about it, and try and find out, like how it is that they do the things that they do like it. And so it helped like that. But I think, a lot of it so much is, finding the story, finding the voice that's going to tell that story, and then combining those two and making it work. And then it's going to be always a question, in any type of art like that, you're going to have a balance between, what you think is going to be a commercial success and what is going to be an artistic success, like, and trying to blend those two together.
Because you just want the artistic part.
I really did. Like that was all I was concerned with. I figured that was their business, like at the business part of it, like because they'd been doing it for 100 years, like that. So they probably knew a little bit more about it than I did.
So you knew at 18 you want to be a writer.
I did. But like I said,
that's fortunate. However that happened, that wasn't my experience. But there's so many other people too that you just need to decide and go all in with something and make a great life out of the thing you find, or make a decision on.
Yep.
I don't have any envy in my life but two people. One, that 18-year-old kid that knows what they want their life to be. And because you can get really busy because the earlier you start, the more you can do.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other second one is the old couple at 80 or 90 years old sitting on a bench that are full of contentment.
Yeah.
That you just know. They don't need to say a word.
Yep. It's a life shared.
Yeah. Those are the only two.
That makes the biggest difference in the world. It really does.
So how do you think, when did that 18-year-old, at what age did you know?
Oh, I mean, knowing and doing are two different things. Like, you know, and I desperately wanted.
I'll give you credit for doing.
Well, okay,
massive,
thanks.
100%. Yeah. Because so many people have an idea.
Right.
Yeah, they just go to die because nobody does anything with them.
Well, and the thing is like, you know, because it's, you know, you hear a lot of, like, you know, a lot of people talking about things like that, about what it is that, you know, people should do or that. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, like, is telling people or to believe, like, that, you know, like, where's your passion? Where's your heart? And all that, like that, because, you know, there are a lot of things you can be passionate about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any opportunity at all. You know, heck, I would have liked to have been, you know, like, you know, the catcher for the Cincinnati Reds, like, but that job was already taken.
Yeah, we wouldn't let you be that. The big red machine back in the day. Boy, I don't think Johnny was giving up that role.
Not at all. Like, and I grew up a fan too. Like, you know, my biggest thing was I heard he was 6 foot even and 200 pounds. Like,
hands,
and all I wanted to do was be 6 foot even and 200 pounds. And I got to the 6 foot, and I've been trying to get back to the 200 pounds ever since.
And Judy's accepted for every pound.
Yeah.
So when do you think, I mean, when did it occur to you you wanted to be a writer? Were you inspired by anybody else, or did you read something? What are you saying? Let me guess, you wrote, you read, what is it? Dang it. That everybody says, all the great writers. Who's the guy? Who's one of the writers? The book. Is there one? I'm going to come up with it. I'm losing my head. In the Rye.
Oh, Catcher in the Rye.
Is this where this is coming from?
No.
Did you have that moment, though?
I don't know. I think, you know, what it was is like, I just, you know, the effect that writing can have and reading, you know, the effect that reading, more importantly, like it can have on your life. I mean, you know, only those of us who actually do read, like, know just what an enhancement that is to our lives on a daily basis. Like, and I just was like stunned, you know, by some of these incredible writers, like, you know, people like John Steinbeck, you know, Charles Dickens, like, you know, Harper Lee, like, all these writers that had written, you know, such incredible works, like, and I mean, they're life altering when you read them. And you just can't help but think, you know, boy, if I could in some small way, you know, be a part of that, you know, that would be a worthy cause, like, to get involved with, like that. But boy, it's a dicey proposition. It really is.
With so many books written now, are there going to be a few standout Huckleberry Finns and Catcher in the Rye? Like, are there going to be?
Well,
there's so many.
That's the big question. Like that, you know, I mean, there's a lot of these, you know, programs that are like dropping a lot of like classic literature and picking up more modern pieces and all of this. And that's all right, like, because I think it shows, you know, diversity and all of that. But nonetheless, like, there's an awful lot of stuff that I read nowadays that people say, oh, this is a great book. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, boy, I don't know if anybody's going to be reading this in 50 or 100 years, you know, like it. And that does come from like that plethora of, you know, produced, written, and published material that there is now. There's this maw, you know, of
but it's
media.
an opportunity, right?
It is.
Because write a great book.
It is.
And it will stand out in the crowd.
Absolutely. Like that. And, you know, and it does make for more opportunities for more writers like that. But then again, it also makes for an awful lot of mediocrity out there too.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of noise and marketing around books now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I have my team pushing me to write a book, and I'm in the midst, but it's not with the same balance, the same integrity, and the same intention that you wrote your books. It's not. I think it's here's where I'm at, this crossroads. I said so much I've learned and educated my mind is from books, and if everyone would just go read those books, they can educate their mind the same way. Another one of my books in my perspective doesn't need to be written.
Well, but you're doing a cumulative of that, like that. You're taking it from your perspective, like that, and drawing all those like threads together, you know, to make what it is you want to do. Sounds like what you're doing exactly what I do, like that, which is like we're more like crows. You know, we go out and fly around out there in that world, like that, and pick up what we want, like that, and bring it back to the nest and put that in your book. Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of people don't have the time to read like 70 different books that you've read in a lifetime, but they can take that synthesis of information that you can bring to it, like that, and read that one book.
what catches your eye to pick up a book?
Oh,
is it the author, or is it something that you just didn't know was going to catch your eyes?
I think it's more the subject matter. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of authors that I read every book that they write, but then again, that's a small list. And a lot of times if I'm just browsing through a bookstore or something like that, I'll pick it up, look and see what the book is about and to say, okay, yeah, that's interesting. And it looks something.
Is it the foreword? What
unique.
is it? What makes you keep turning?
I do that. I look at the flap folder, and then I'll, toss it open, about, midway, and read a couple of paragraphs just to see, am I going to be able to tolerate this writing style? Is this somebody I'm going to be able to put up with for 300 pages? Because that's a dicey proposition too. When a lot of people ask about the audiobooks, we've had a lot of awards for the audiobooks, and I've got a really fantastic reader George Guidell, who is does a lot of incredible books, and he's done all of mine. He's done all 21 novels, 3 novellas, and a collection of short stories. And it's been fantastic because I've never had to look back. But that's a dicey proposition because you need, and for an audiobook, you need a good book, and then you need a good reader. Okay, because otherwise, it can go right into the toilet really quick. I remember driving across country one time, and it was middle of the night, I was going into a Flying J truck stop, and there in the Flying J truck stop, this is a while back, they had an entire unabridged cassette set of Moby Dick. And I thought, oh, yeah, I can throw this in the cassette player and I can drive for the next 12 hours, no problem at all. And discount, $4.99. Well, you get what you paid for, And so I got out there and I put that first cassette in. And I don't know who this community theater actor was that they picked out to play this thing But boy, he was like John Gielgud on steroids is what he was. He was oh, call me Ishmael. And I was like, oh, boy. Yeah.
Here we go.
No, I didn't even make it through one half of one cassette.
So you think a good book, the way you see it, a couple paragraphs,
you certainly get a feel, you get a taste, for what it is that the writer's style, is and sometimes you can be surprised obviously, because if that's just a whim, where you're just plucking out a couple of paragraphs from an entire novel, yeah, maybe not. You can also get fooled. You might have, you might hit a really good spot, and read that and then get started.
Well, that's the place to put it if you're an author.
Exactly.
Put it on the first page. That's the spot.
Absolutely.
They say human to human, we have such a micro moment to gain trust, gain credibility, to have someone like us. That's what I'm wondering, in writing, how long do we have?
I don't know. That's a good question. I do know that most, editors, acquisition editors, at an agents in New York, basically what they tell me is about 12, 15 pages. They'll start a manuscript and they'll go about 12 or 15 pages. And by the time they get through with those, they know whether this thing is worth doing or not, or worth reading. Mm-hmm. And so, boy, focus on that first 12, 15 pages. Make sure they're sharp.
What'd you like more? Did you like the series and making the movies, making the shows, or writing the books?
Oh, writing the books.
Well, I knew you were going to say that, but I'm like, where's it compare?
But I did enjoy the television show. I was very fortunate that I had the showrunners and producers I had done a bunch of all of these very, very successful shows and so they were very, very, they were wonderful about including me in a lot of the decision-making process. One of the things they did is I remember talking to Lee Child, Michael Connelly and a couple other guys who had movies or TV shows done of their stuff and I asked them, I said, well, what do I have to expect here? And they said they will slide a check across the table and then you will probably never hear from them again. And then here in a year or two, you might recognize what it is, when you see it on television, or you might not. And I was like, well, that's all right. I can understand that. I prefer something else like that, but I understand as an 8-book author from a town of 25 I better take what I can get. Well, these were some really wonderful producers and I was surprised by it, and they actually, to the point where they actually even sent me boxes of DVDs of the auditions for the actors that they were considering for the roles in the TV show.
They wanted your input, or they were willing to allow you to have it.
Yeah, and they, Hollywood doesn't do that. They just don't. They don't care what the author has to say. This is singing about painting as far as that's concerned. Like, and so, it was very interesting to see. And then, like whenever they would make changes or, deviate, from, the narrative line of the novels, they would explain to me, why it was that they were doing this, why this was going to be a little bit different from what it was in the books, and, why it works on television this way. And, with a 42-minute teleplay, this is the breakdown. We can't do, one of the first meetings I had with them, they said, your books don't break down into a 42-page teleplay. And I was like, thank goodness. If they did, you shouldn't be reading them, for goodness sake. Like, and so, they said, what we're going to do is we're going to cherry pick, bits and pieces, from all the different books like that, and then utilize those to create shorter versions, of the arc that you've got for the story.
You didn't feel too precious to it that don't mess with my work?
No, I think, the best thing you can do, as you well know, in any kind of business, is get the very best people that you can to work with. And what do you do at that point is leave them the hell alone. Let them do the thing that you've hired them to do, for gosh sake.
So, man, I'm glad you're right into that one. I don't know if I tried to or not, but is how much of this has been intentional selection, or was it the people that were just willing to? Because you went to New York, right? And you heard a lot of no's.
Yep.
It's just the lady that said yes.
Yeah.
I mean, was there any chance you were going to say no?
But she was too wonderful. She was fantastic. And then the whole relationship that I've had, with the publisher now here for 20 years has been just a dream come true. So many authors they change, they change agents, they change publishers, they change all these different kinds of things. I've had absolutely no reason to try and do that for 20 years. I pretty much started with the A-list and landed at the A-list and stayed on the A-list.
You think it was more about you and more about them?
No.
So you don't think so?
No, I think it was them. It was just a quality, that I stepped into that just, because I'm talking about the business aspect of it, obviously. Because that is really, the success of that's all just been a side effect in many ways. The only thing I wanted to do, I swear to God, was I wanted to sell enough books that I could continue writing books. That's all I really wanted to ever do.
That's the story of success, though, because everybody that wants to make it about money,
right?
It gets interrupted along the way before it becomes great. Something happens.
Yeah.
Something happens. And when you hear that you just care about making the thing great, a book, a business, a building.
Yeah.
That's the story that is consistent through the theme of success in life.
And it with the writing it's a little bit easier like that, because you are in that room alone by yourself, conceiving this stuff like that. And so, boy, your focus better be on that work, is whether it be and so I think if you're out there hustling around and doing all this stuff, maybe it's a little bit different, but I don't think so. I think you have to have that idea that this is what you want to do and you're going to do it the very best that you can possibly do it.
If you had one of these ranches where teenagers and youth would come, I'm not saying trouble, but just in general, I went to camps. I went to northern Minnesota as a kid. We went to the Boundary Waters, and we would be canoeing, and we'd do these
And the
portages.
Mosquitoes didn't carry you away?
They did. We'd go over to the Canadian trading posts and stuff, but we sprayed ourselves down. I learned a lot on those. I'd go to these camps for 3 weeks. It was in Orr, Minnesota, north of Duluth, and Pelican Lake. These moments when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, some of these experiences.
Oh,
I'm sure you had some.
Very impressionable.
Maybe yours on ranches and stuff.
Very impressionable.
What would you teach 12 and 14 and 16 and 18-year-old kids if you designed a program to bring them to your ranch? What's the things you would teach them?
Start them off with what my dad said. Don't be afraid of a hard day's work or an ass kicking. Just jump right in and do it. You don't know until you try. So that would be the big thing. I just think that, a lot of people are intimidated. They start off thinking about these dreams that they have and everything, but they get talked out of it. And it's almost like what you said, as far as the opinions of other people that other people talk you right out of your life if you give them a chance.
Boy, we can sit here and talk forever. Craig Johnson. Wow. Sheriff Longmire. What a pleasure to have a conversation. A cowboy all the way from Wyoming to here. And see, even though you came to Cincinnati, you're sitting on the good side of the river with the folks of Kentucky right now, right? So,
well, I can tell because all the bourbon on these kegs over here. I can see that.
That's I'm sure that if we go to Wyoming, it's probably inspires us about ranches, and we're going to see horns up on the wall and some moose antlers and all that
That's
stuff.
True.
So we're indicative. We're bluegrass and we're bourbon. I think as long as you don't drink too much of it, it's something pretty cool to be from.
Absolutely.
Thanks
You're kind of famous for your horses here too. Like
I had an uncle who was a horse trader. He used to go to Ocala, Florida. They had a lot down there. And then he was in LaGrange, Kentucky, just north of Louisville.
Wow.
And because my grandpa, George Stahl, came over from Germany in early 1900s. And he was the guy in northern Kentucky that took everyone's cattle down Dixie Highway, down to Louisville to the slaughterhouse. He took everyone's.
Wow.
So I don't know if it would have been called a broker. I don't know. I don't know what his fee was, but he was the guy that took everybody's cattle down there to do it. So he was the guy.
Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't do any of that stuff.
See, you could have done cattle drives.
I could have. Yeah. I think so.
Younger and
You know what's funny? My mom grew up riding horses and stuff. I grew up on motorcycles. But about when I was 23 or 24, I had never been on a horse, which is wild, right?
Yeah.
And so I had some friends. It might have been, no, maybe it was 25, 26. I just had a breakup of dating somebody for 7 years before I met Jenna. We've been together 17 years now.
You were in crisis. Look at when this happened.
I was in fun mode.
Oh, okay.
And my fun mode was experiencing life, not just going out chasing the girls, but it was let's get out here and do some different things. So I had some friends call me and they're like, "Hey man, we're going to jump on some horses at my farm. Why don't you come by?" And I'm that guy, and wife was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Can somebody give me a lesson?" I'm like, "No, man. We're going to put the saddle on here." And, they made me tie and hook my own saddle.
Right.
Not the best idea. And they gave me the biggest horse. His name was Gus.
Okay.
He knew I was intimidated.
They have a way. They have a way of knowing these things.
And they put me on that horse, and we were 11 p.m. at night.
Oh, gosh.
Riding the hills of power lines. And I got to the top of one hill.
You know those things don't have headlights. You know that, right?
There was rocks everywhere. I was very scared. I was scared for my life. I'm not going to lie. I was riding motorcycles, but these things were fast, and trees and branches are hitting me in the face. But the saddle halfway up one of these, we call them mountains here, ended up on the side of the horse.
Right.
I made it to the top. I just had a guy text me the other day. I hadn't seen him for 20 years. And he's like, "Dude, I still think about you riding up that hill on that power line with the saddle sideways."
See, you're a legend.
And he said, "How in the world did you stay on top of that thing?" I was like, I was scared to break my neck. So I think I need to come to Wyoming to really see how it's done.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
The where does the person if we want to experience Wyoming, we're going to end this. This is our first cow. Where do we start our Wyoming adventure?
Well, I did there's actually I did a travelogue piece for Cowboys and Indians magazine called the Longmire Loop. And so all you got to do is just jump on the internet and put in Longmire Loop and it'll come up. There's a lot of really wonderful parts. There's the Granddaddy of them all, the Big Cheyenne Rodeo. There's Jackson Hole, at Yellowstone and all that. But my favorite part of Wyoming, and probably my favorite part of the whole world, is that Bighorn Mountain region because it's still a wilderness area surrounded by a national forest. So what that means is in a wilderness area, there's no roads, there's no electricity, there's nothing. When you go in with leather, either boot leather or saddle leather, and there's no $1 million condos, there's no $1 billion ski resorts or any of that stuff. It's all old lodges from the 40s and 30s and things like that, and so it's more like going back in time, which I really kind of appreciate. The more and faster paced the world gets, and it means more to me to be able to escape back into that period.
All these wealthy people do this glamping now.
Yeah.
Do you ever see that popping up? You're like, what's going on?
No, not around where we are now.
They don't make it to the U-turn at U-Cross.
No, not so much.
Well, hey, thanks for coming in. Much success with this final book. I don't think you need anybody to wish it for you. You've set this thing on a heck of a path.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we just landed actually yesterday at number 12 on the New York Times bestsellers list. So
how's that happen?
Just
because they already know you're that damn good?
No, it's how many you sell. How many books you sell across the country.
Already number 12.
Yeah.
What's the top that any of these landed?
Let's see. I think I had one that was number 4, I believe.
Can you beat that with this?
I don't know. We'll see.
Look at him. He's a we'll see guy. Thanks for stopping in. Much success. And,
thank you, sir.
Through all your travels, go back to that nice crazy winter in U-Cross.
Come on out.
Hey, listen, we'll be Longmire Days in Buffalo, Wyoming in July.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, they don't need any more people. The sheriff might throw us out. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Okay.